I've owned my Ford F-150 Lightning for 2.5 years now and driven it 34,000 miles. Overall, I am extremely happy with the vehicle. It's one of the best electric vehicles that I've ever owned. But one of the things I have complained about from time to time is its DC fast charging capability. I wish it fast charged a little bit quicker. Well, Ford must have been listening, because they're pushing out an over-the-air update now that will allow my Lightning to charge faster. And that's what we're going to talk about here today, so let's get into it. So first I want to talk a little bit about Ford's DC fast charging strategy. It holds true for both the Lightning and the Mustang Mach-E. With my Lightning, when I plug in, I get a short period of somewhere around 8 minutes of full amperage or current that the vehicle can take in. And with my Lightning, the 2022 and 2023 model year Lightnings, I have a 2022, that maximum current was 450 amps. And that would allow me to charge at somewhere around 170 kilowatts for about 8 minutes. And then the charging curve would slow up and I'd charge at around 120 kilowatts up to close to 80%. So the 24 Lightning comes out, and I'm noticing now when some people post videos that in their initial boost period, that initial 8 minutes, we call it the initial charge boost, I saw some Lightnings charging at around 180, maybe even a little bit higher kilowatts, and my Lightning never did that. So I reached out to Ford, this was a few months back, and said, hey, what's going on with this? Did you change the charging curve? Unfortunately, I didn't get an initial answer back then, but I knew something was up, and I knew that they had changed the charging curve for the 2024 model years, and I had fully intended on following up on it, but I just got sidetracked. So then, back, I guess in December, when the Iona network had a soft opening, Kyle from Out of Spec Motors organized a get-together at the Iona site in Apex, North Carolina to test out their equipment. I drove down to North Carolina, made a video there, and when I plugged in on the Alpatronic charger there that has the display screen showing the current that's being taken, the charge curve, all that stuff, we noticed that my Lightning was taking in 500 amps. And it shouldn't be. It should have been maxing out at 450 amps. So once that was over, I contacted Ford and said, hey guys, now you have to tell me what's going on with this, because there's definitely a change in my vehicle. And they responded, you know, sometimes you have to ping the media departments in all the companies because they get questions all the time. So I understand why maybe they didn't get me an answer when I first asked. But they said, okay, we're on it, Tom, we'll get you an answer. So I find out that they had a customer satisfaction update, an over-the-air update. It's called 23B50. It started rolling out in the fall to early access customers, and they sent me my update the early December. It must have been right before I did this charge recording at the Iona site. And honestly, I'm sure it told me in the truck that you have a software update, or maybe even my wife got into the vehicle that day. I have automatic updates, and we probably just knocked it off. And I didn't notice that the vehicle had an update and didn't know it was charging faster. So I got the update back in December. I think I was part of the early access program. But now they're starting to roll out this update to all 2022 and 2023 Lightning owners. So it's going to allow you to charge a little bit faster. How much faster? Well, that's what we're going to find out here today, because I took my Lightning to an EVgo charger that can deliver up to 500 amps and recorded a 10 to 80% charging session. We're going to plot out the curve, and then I'm going to compare it to some of my previous charging sessions that I've done with the Lightning. I've done extensive DC fast charging analysis where I've plugged in at various states of charge and charged up to 80%, plotted them all out on charts. So we'll be able to take a look at this new charging curve now and compare it to the old ones. Now, it used to take me about 45 minutes, somewhere between 44 and 45 minutes, because I did it multiple times, to charge from 10% to 80% on a DC fast charger. So now let's see how long it takes me with the 500 amp current max, and whether or not the rest of the charging curve looks a little different, because that's what I'm really interested in. I know the first 7 or 8 minutes I'm going to get more power, but then did they massage the rest of the charging curve, which I hope they did. So with that said, let's take a look at the 10 to 80% DC fast charge recording that I did, and then we'll compare it to my previous charts. This video was sponsored by Qmerit, North America's premier installer of electric vehicle charging equipment. After I've helped you decide which electric vehicle charger you're going to buy, follow the link in the description of my videos and have Qmerit install it. And if you follow that link, Qmerit will waive the $150 installation deposit. But in order to have the deposit waived, you must follow the link in the description of my videos. It only takes 30 seconds before the Lightning is pulling 500 amps. Well, 499 amps to be precise, but that's an insignificant difference. It continues to pull full current for 7 minutes before the Lightning starts calling for less power. And I'm going to stop the video here to see where we're at. So after 7 minutes, the Lightning added 16% of the battery and is sitting at 26% state of charge. It's charging at 182 kilowatts, which is the peak power draw for this session. You may have noticed that rate has been climbing since shortly after I plugged in, and it was charging at 174 kilowatt. Since the vehicle has been calling for the same amount of current, 500 amps the whole time, you may wonder why the charging rate is climbing. And that's because the battery pack voltage climbs as the state of charge increases. And the charging rate is a product of the battery pack voltage times the current. Volts times amps gives you the kilowatt charging rate. Okay, so moving on, you can see the charging station has dispensed 20.1 kilowatt hour. With charging losses, that means right around 18 kilowatt hour has actually made it into the battery pack, which is roughly good for about 40 miles of driving with a Lightning, conditions permitting, of course. Starting back up the recording, I see the Lightning is holding a much higher charging rate after the initial charging boost than it used to. With the old software, the Lightning used to drop sharply down to somewhere between 120 and 125 kilowatt, but now it's more of a gradual drop and it levels off at 164 kilowatt for about 5 minutes. And this is all an improvement over the old charging profile. In fact, it's not until after 19 minutes of charging that the Lightning dropped to accepting 125 kilowatt, and the charging profile returns to what it was pre-update. All of the previous charging time here has been an improvement over how it charged before the 23B50 Customer Satisfaction Program OTA update. So this is going to add up to significant time savings. And the 10 to 80% charging session here ends after 39 minutes and 43 seconds. Okay, so 39 minutes and 43 seconds to charge from 10% to 80%. That's not all that good, but it is better than it previously charged. It used to take me somewhere between 44 and 45 minutes to charge from 10% to 80%. I've done this multiple times, and I keep track of how long it takes me. So it's about a 5-minute improvement, which is pretty good. I think that's around 11% of an improvement, and not bad for a single OTA update. Now, this is coming 2.5 years after the launch of the vehicle, nearly 3 years after the launch of the vehicle. So I'm not going to give Ford all that much credit. If they had done this 8 or 9 months into the vehicle's launch, I might give them a little bit more credit here. So it's taken a while. But yes, Ford F-150 Lightning owners now have improved charging. Of course, this is the standard charging profile of the 2024 and now 2025 Lightnings, but the early adopters, the 2023 and 2022 Lightning owners, are getting faster charging. I don't know exactly how long it's going to take for the software update to roll out to everybody, but you will get it. Okay, how great is 39 minutes and 43 seconds to charge from 10 to 80%? Not really that great. It's really not even that good. I talk frequently here on the channel about the need to charge from 10 to 80% in under 30 minutes. This took almost 40 minutes. So it's still not where it needs to be. And I know there's some people that'll say, well, Tom, the Lightning has a huge battery pack. Of course, it's going to take longer to charge. Well, that's not really how this works. It's really all about the C rate. And, that's the charging rate, how fast the vehicle can discharge or charge its battery pack. And larger batteries can take higher power for more sustained periods of time. So in theory, the larger battery EVs should charge the same as smaller battery EVs from a certain starting point to the ending point. So the Lightning should be able to charge much quicker. And there are EVs in China that have very large battery packs that can charge from 10 to 80% in well under 20 minutes even. So Ford and some of the other OEMs have some catching up to do with regards to DC fast charging. But as I've mentioned before in some of my previous videos, it's not so slow that it's prohibitive to go on a long road trip. I've driven my Lightning down to Florida from New Jersey. I've driven it well deep up into Canada. I've taken it on long road trips where I've had to make multiple stops to DC fast charge. And typically, I might drive for 3.5 hours and then have to stop for what was 45 minutes-ish. Now it might be 40 minutes, so it's a 5-minute time savings. It'll add up when you're on a long road trip. Okay, well, that's what it looked like on the recording. Now let's take a look at what this charging session looks like on my charts and graphs. So as soon as I plugged in, the charging power went up to about 174 kilowatt. And it gradually climbed as the pack voltage increased up till about the 26% state of charge point, which was after 7 minutes of charging. And then we have this gradual drop off here. And this is different than the previous charging curve, which I'll compare it to in a minute, because it used to drop off a lot as soon as that 7 or 8 minute boost was up. But as you can see here, it gradually goes down, and it actually holds at around 164 kilowatt all the way up to the 40% state of charge point, which again is better than what it used to. Then you have this drop off here down to this level here where it charges between 115 and 125 kilowatt all the way up to about 79% when it drops off at the 80% state of charge point. Now let's see how it compares to my previous charge recordings. So now let's take a look at this charging session from 10 to 80% compared to a 5 to 80% and a 15 to 80% charging session I did with my Lightning with the old software. So as you can see here in the beginning of those two previous charging sessions, after the initial boost period, the charging power drops off dramatically and then holds a higher rate for a short period of time before dropping down and charging at somewhere between 110 and 125 kilowatt for the rest of the charging session. But if you look at the new software, not only does it hold this higher rate for the initial boost, but the charging power doesn't fall off a cliff like it previously did. It actually gradually lowers, then holds an even higher rate for a while before dropping down into that final run where it holds at around 120, 125 kilowatt. That's the same behavior as we saw with the old charging software, but the entire earlier part of the charging session is dramatically improved here. And you could see it here when I show just how much extra power is added between the new software and my 15 to 80% charging test, and then in yellow, the improvement over the 5 to 80% charging session. And this all adds up to you saving quite a bit of time at a DC fast charger. Next up, let's take a look at the time to charge chart. On the x-axis, it's the charging time in minutes, and on the y-axis, it's the state of charge. You can see we started at 10%, we finished at 80%, and it took about 39.5 minutes to finish the charging session. On this chart, the more vertical the line is, the faster it's charging. And you can see the first 15 minutes of the session, the line is more vertical and then it becomes more horizontal after that. And that's when the charging rate slowed down considerably. Now let's take a look at how many miles per minute were added during this charging session. You can see here for the first 15 minutes of charging, the charging line splits my 10 miles a minute and 5 mile a minute guidelines right in half. So it's charging right around 7.5 miles per minute. But after that, the line now becomes more parallel with the 5 mile per minute charging curve, which isn't great. Anything under 5 miles per minute I consider slow for DC fast charging. Okay, so now let's take a look at the miles per minute added in 10-minute sections, the first 10 minutes, second 10 minutes, and third 10 minutes of this charging session. And we're going to use the EPA rated range of 320 miles for an F-150 Lightning with the extended range battery pack like mine is, and also my 70 mile an hour highway range test in which the Lightning went 270 miles. So as you can see here, the first 10 minutes of charging was the fastest, which is normal for all DC fast charging tests. We added 7.2 miles of range for every minute of charging if you use the EPA range rating of 320 miles. If you want to go by my 70 mile an hour highway range test, we added 6.1 miles of range for every minute charging. In the second 10 minutes of charging, from the 10-minute mark to the 20-minute mark, 6 miles of range per minute added according to EPA, 5.1 miles according to my 70 mile an hour highway range test. And from 20 minutes to 30 minutes of charging, we added only 4.8 miles of range for every minute according to the EPA and 4.0 miles of range added for every minute according to my 70 mile an hour highway range test. Not good. This really demonstrates that the Lightning, even with this new improved charging curve, is still not a very good DC fast charging electric vehicle. And now let's take a look at this charging session versus my 5 to 80% and 15 to 80% charging tests I did with the old software. The new software charge recording is in red. You can see it starts at 10%. The blue line is the 15 to 80% and the black line is the 5 to 80%. And you can see here the 5 to 80% is below these two charging sessions for the whole way out. So let's really take a look at the charging session I just did versus the 15 to 80% session I did last year. And you can see here that after about 16 minutes of charging, the 10 to 80% charging session I did now meets the same state of charge as the 15 to 80% charging session that I did. So it caught up at that point. However, the very end of the charging session, the 15 to 80% session charged slightly faster. So basically, with the new software, you can plug in at about 5% lower state of charge and still finish up within a minute of what you would have finished up with the older software. If you're starting at a low state of charge, say under 20% and charging to 80%. And next up, we'll use the time to charge chart to see how long it takes to add miles of driving range. We'll see how long it takes to add 50, 100, 150, and 200 miles of range according to the EPA range rating and also my 70 mile an hour highway range test. For 50 miles of EPA rated range, it took 6.4 minutes. It took 7.7 minutes if you use my highway range test. For 100 miles of range added, 13.7 minutes EPA, 16.8 minutes 70 mile an hour range test. For 150 miles of added driving range, EPA, it's 22.9 minutes. And according to my highway range test, 28.8 minutes. And if you need to add 200 miles of EPA rated range, it's going to take a little under 34 minutes, 33.6 minutes. And in this 10 to 80% charging session, I didn't add 200 miles of driving range according to my 70 mile an hour highway range test. And finally, let's take a look at my master charging chart for the F-150 Lightning. With this chart here, each block represents 10% state of charge. And from this chart, you can get data from any 10% block of this charging session. For instance, you could see data from the whole charging session, which would be 10% to 80%. That's this box down here. Or you could say, let me take a look at the data from 30% starting point to 70% starting point. That would be this box here. And in each box, you have how long it took for that section of the charging session in minutes, how much state of charge was added, how much range was added, and that's according to EPA, not my range test, the average power that the vehicle was taking in during that particular section of the charging session, and how much energy was added in kilowatt hour in that section. Now you'll also notice that there's different colored boxes, and that's because the bright green colored boxes represents when the vehicle was charging between 80% and 100% of its maximum charging rate during this session. And the darker green represents that it was charging slower than 80% of its maximum charging rate. You notice that happens later in the charging session when the vehicle was charging slower. And now let's take a look at the full charging session, which would be the box in the first column starting at 10% and ending at 80%. You see it took 39 minutes. We added 70% state of charge and 224 miles according to the EPA range rating. The average charging power over this whole session was 141 kilowatt, and we added 92 kilowatt hour. And I'm not going to go over the rest of these boxes, but you can take a screenshot and print the chart. You could also get it from evchargingstations.com. That's my website where all of the charts for all the charging sessions that I've done are hosted. Okay, so there you have it. If you own a 2022 or 2023 Ford F-150 Lightning, if you haven't received it already, you should be receiving this over-the-air update that will allow the vehicle to charge faster. I've done many 10 to 80% charge recordings with my Lightning previously with the old software. It always took somewhere between 43 and 45 minutes, as long as the battery was at the right temperature. And now it takes slightly under 40 minutes. So it's about a 5-minute savings, which is good for a road trip. I'll take the 5 minutes any day of the week. It still isn't a great fast charging electric vehicle though. The Lightning, I still consider it kind of borderline acceptable. I think Ford could pump those kilowatt hour into the pack a little bit faster than what they currently do. I think they're being very cautious. They want to make sure that long-term stress on the battery from DC fast charging doesn't cause the battery to degrade. But we've seen a lot of data from other electric vehicles that allow much higher charging rates. And it doesn't seem like the DC fast charging is affecting the battery nearly as much as we thought it would years ago. And I think that's because the thermal management systems on the vehicles work so well that they keep the battery at the right temperature so it doesn't degrade during DC fast charging as much as we thought that electric vehicle batteries would. So does it make that big of a difference for you on a road trip? Maybe not. If you frequently DC fast charge, you'll notice a difference. If you do it once every couple of months and just charge at home, this probably doesn't make a big difference to you. But I like the fact that Ford understood that they could do better and improved the DC fast charging rate. I hope that this isn't the last time they do it. I think there's still some room for improvement. And I'd love to see them get that 10 to 80% charging session down closer to 30 minutes. They should be able to with the size of the Lightning's battery pack. I really think that it can hold a sustained higher kilowatt draw for a longer period of time. Perhaps Ford's already experimenting with that, and we'll get another OTA update sometime down the future. But for now, there is noticeable difference, and I'd like to thank Ford for improving the DC fast charging characteristics of the Lightning. And as I said, hopefully it won't be the last time they do that. Listen, if this is your first time here at State of Charge, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming electric vehicle news and reviews. And as always, thanks for watching.